Hey guys, Stephanie here with the Aeroponic Tower channel, and today I'm just going to take you guys on a tour and discuss what you can grow indoors on an aeroponic tower garden. So sometimes I'll get the question like, where do I put each plant on the tower? And what people want sort of a blueprint of everything to grow and where to put it. And I will tell you that I don't offer. For a couple of reasons. One, it's ever changing. Like there isn't the perfect place to put one thing so that it does amazing. Like you can put them anywhere. I often will give tips like lettuce does better up top than towards the bottom, but that doesn't mean I never grow lettuce towards the bottom. And the reason being because I interval plant, and I'm going to talk a lot about how to do that with an indoor tower and the formula for that. And when you interval plant, I'm taking something that's ready to go into the tower and putting it wherever I harvested something. And that means I'm going to get lettuce anywhere and everywhere on my tower. Like it's going to go where it can go when it's time to put it into the tower. And you can move things, but I like to not fuss with things a lot. You don't want to risk breaking roots. It is possible to move plants, and I do it often, but it's not necessary because there actually isn't a perfect spot or a perfect way to lay out your tower. There's just some tips we can be thinking of and kind of think like, is this plant, for example, like an Imiko cabbage, it's tall and skinny. Well, that would be a great plant to put in between like a pepper plant and a tomato because those are bushy. So I do think through things like that. Like, is this lettuce going to get completely shaded out? If I put it right here, then I might move something to that spot that's a better fit and put my lettuce somewhere different. But for the most part, there's no perfect formula. There are some things to consider when growing indoors. However, because we are, it's in my pocket. I was cleaning my towers. We are limited. We are, growing out of season in an environment that's different than what plants are used to, right? So there are some limitations. So I'm going to talk through those with you guys. And then just note, as we take a tour, and I'm doing this on my phone today because it shows better images, I can get up closer. So I'm just going to kind of flip the camera around and let you guys see the plants. And you'll notice some of my plants may look a little bit droopy. And there's some things going on with my plants that you won't necessarily have to deal with if you're only growing indoors. Now, if you're transitioning your towers or if you're growing in a garage or a building like I am, where you're not maintaining constant AC temperatures or constant room temperatures and airflow through like central heat or central air, then you may have some of the things going on that I have. Now, these are not issues. They're not problems or challenges. They are just the reality of growing food when seasons change, because we went from winter and we're moving into spring. And so we went from this garage being very, very cold to fluctuating between very cold and very hot, which caused some of my plants to bolt, which means go to flower. That may be the case if you're growing in a garage too, where then you're going to take the towers outside in the spring, and it's just part of the transitional seasons. Now, if you're growing strictly indoors, your tower is going to stay in your kitchen full time. You won't have these issues. So you can kind of ignore some of those things that I bring up that are just specific, like what's going on with this plant when you see it is just specific to right now, like in this garage, it's actually hot. But then at night, it'll be 30 degrees. If you're growing outside, like in a raised bed, this happens. It's very, very common in spring gardens. We get our crops, we put them outside, everything's booming and amazing. And then it gets really hot for a couple of days and those plants immediately say, make seeds, bolt. Real common in spring gardens. All that to say, some of the things, if I bring up a few things, here, you won't have those same issues if you're growing indoors in a controlled environment where your temperatures aren't fluctuating at huge amounts like I am in here. I would love to grow inside our house, but the temperatures aren't controlled in there either because we don't use AC most of the time. So it is what it is, right? We work with what we have, and you'll see the abundance is incredible. So even a couple of little, not even challenges, even a couple of little things that aren't perfect right now are not a waste. These are actually just plants I'm gonna take and do a huge juicing with tonight. These are just plants that I put on the table a little bit sooner than I had anticipated. So let's flip the camera around and go take a tour. All right, we're just gonna start over here and break down everything. There's the first tower of the season to be outside fully, growing cool weather crops and lettuce, and it's doing amazing. Here is my tomato tower. There's quite a few things on here. So tomatoes, if you choose the right varieties, they grow amazing indoors. I like to do the hanging baskets varieties or the heartbreaker varieties from Totally Tomato. Anything outside of that, I just don't think is ideal. You can do some Roma tomatoes. Again, they're gonna be slower, but something like this one, and I will put the name right here because I don't remember it off the top of my head. It produces in abundance. Look at this. And these come in with a few of them ripening every day, and then it's flowering and it's got other buds. And so as long as you're harvesting these, it keeps growing and producing new tomatoes. And so that's what we want. Now this one has been the most prolific out of all of them. And so I'm really, really happy with that. These are part of the Heartbreaker series, and these do really well as well. And you can tell these aren't giant plants. They're not taking over my house or my garage. They're small, like they're well maintained. I do trim the leaves back so they have good airflow, and I allow them to fill out a little bit, and then I'll just cut the leaves back. You don't have to do that. I do think there is some theories that it makes more tomatoes the more you cut the greens. I don't really know. I've gone down that rabbit hole a few times and don't have the answer, but I just like to keep them really trimmed up because it makes them easier to manage, and because I grow a lot of other food underneath them, and it allows that food to get light. Now, some of them haven't bloomed and haven't done really well, and it's because of the temperature. So in order for a tomato to set fruit, it has to have a certain temperature, and if it's too cold, it won't set fruit, and this garage was getting really, really cold. So that's why I like that one variety, because it seems to not be finicky to temperatures and things like some of the other ones are. So I will definitely put that right here so you have that name, and those came from Totally Tomato. I am gonna share my formula with you guys on how to plan your food and what amount of your tower you should devote to growing something like tomatoes and peppers. If you're only growing indoors, there is some things to consider there. So I'm growing on 7 towers indoors, so I can devote an entire tower to tomatoes. But if you're growing on 1 tower, we need to be mindful of a formula of how much you want your tower to be taken up by foods that are slow growing, not as nutrient dense, that are gonna be on your tower for a really long time. Because if you're just growing tomatoes in your kitchen and most of your tower is set up with tomatoes, you can end up with a long, long period of time where you just don't have any food to eat. So I will share that formula with you guys in a few minutes. So the other things on this tower, and one thing I'm a huge fan of growing indoors, is kohlrabi. Cabbage and a cabbage head is not gonna do well indoors. To get a traditional cabbage just takes so long, and it's forced outside of the perfect growing conditions. That's not one you're gonna have a lot of success with. Have I done it before? Yes. But it's, again, goes back to that idea of how much time it takes and how much space it takes to get a food that doesn't really provide a lot of food for the family. So we want to turn things over really quickly and grow things that actually grow really well indoors. And that is kohlrabi. The way I plant these, in the green ones, the purple ones don't grow as well. I'll put the name of this one right here. And they don't grow as well indoors, or they grow really well, but they are so big, the leaves, that I have found that they're not great for indoors. But kohlrabi, I plant 2 per rock wool, and you'll see that throughout all of my kohlrabis. There's the smaller one down there. Well, maybe we can see it. Okay, so there's the other one. So there's the other one right there, and it's smaller. This one got really, really big. This one's a little bit smaller. And what you can do is cut this one pretty close to the base here and eat it and let the other one continue to grow. You don't have to harvest them both at the same time if you don't want to. I do kohlrabi a lot. I try to do 2 seeds, but like this one right here, obviously one of the seeds didn't take, and it's just one. This is a purple lady bok choy. Great companion to, you know, bushier things. It does fine tucked in there. And then down here, this is cabbage or collards. No, this is a cabbage. Well, I don't know. This is cabbage or collards. I can't really tell. But what I'm doing if I do grow cabbage is I'm going to plant 3 to 4 seeds per rock wool, and I'm growing them for the leaves. So this, I'm pretty sure this is a cabbage or a collard. Same thing. I'm just going to seed them a little bit heavier when I grow one cabbage outside. When I grow cabbage outside, I'll do 1 seed per rock wool because I'm trying to get a head of cabbage. Indoors, we're not going to be able to get that head of cabbage, so it's best to plant like 3 to 5 seeds, and then you're growing them for the leaves. They have the same nutritional value. It just gives me cabbage leaves so I can make cabbage wraps because that's something I really like. Or if I want to add cabbage to a recipe, I can roll up several leaves and julienne them, like slice them, and it gives us cabbage in our diet, which I think is great. Again, that's not going to be a heavy producing crop indoors. So if you only have 1 tower, it might not be worth it. I love to have at least 1 collard plant on my towers because I love collard leaves. But again, that goes back to your diet. Collards will produce for a long period of time, and so you can eat a leaf off of them several times a week if you want to do collard wraps or just add it to juicing because they're so nutritious. So it just depends if it's worth it. You will have that plant a long time and you can eat off of it for a long time. So that is one benefit, but it is going to be slower to get to that large size. So just be prepared for that growth spot to be taken up for about 6 months, possibly even more, before you want to rip that whole plant out and start over. So that's pretty much it on here. There's some smaller kohlrabi that are up here, or cabbages, I can't tell what they are. And then I have a baby greens bundle. I'm always plopping these baby greens in wherever I can. And yeah, so this tower here, this is the home tower, and this is the one most people get for inside. I also have an extension kit on this one, and it's set up a little weird. And if some of my stuff looks droopy, it's because I turned off my towers for a while and I totally forgot. So they haven't perked back up. So if you see some droopy things, that is why. They will perk back. It's totally fine. Also, I just broke my celery apart. I've shared in other videos how I grow them as bundles, and then I take them apart when they get to a certain age. And so those are a little bit droopy and sad today too. That's what's going on with this tower. But this is the home tower. I set this up with the baby greens extension kit in the middle, and then these grow ports at the top. I totally just put it together wrong, and it doesn't matter, so I just left it. So that's why that looks different. You can configure your tower however you want. There's no perfect way. Sometimes I think it'd be better to have the baby greens towards the bottom and the bigger stuff towards the top, so I like to play around with it. This tower is celery because I'm doing a tower just for celery, but for purposes of sharing with you guys who may only have one tower, celery is an excellent crop to grow. It just takes time. It's a slow crop. I like to do one per rock wool when they get larger, and I will multi-seed them when they're little to get a lot of that growing done. And what I mean by that is, I wish I would have not broken it apart to show you guys, but I already broke them apart. I will plant 5 to 10 seeds. I grow a lot of celery, so you may not need to do that much. Like, let's say 3 to 5 seeds of celery. They're very, very slow to germinate. They're very delicate. They're very, very, very slow to grow. It can be well over 2 months before they ever go from your grow station into your tower. So I find multi-seeding one rock wool saves me space on my tower. And then once they're ready to go into the tower, I keep them multi-seeded. So let's say 5 sprouted. I will put those at 1 rock wool with 5 celery into my tower, and then I let it grow until it's bigger than my hand. And at that point, man, I have CrossFit hands for sure. At that point, I will break them apart. And I have other videos on this. If you look at my playlist under celery, I break them apart and give each one an individual rock wool. The reason being, if you want grocery store type celery where you can come out and grab a nice hearty rib or harvest the whole thing to juice or whatever you want to do with it, you need 1 per rock wool. Otherwise, they just grow a bunch of leaves and all you're really getting is celery leaves. So that's sort of my hack there. There's some other things on this tower I want to show you though. Okay, over here, I have some radish. Radish grow great. I plant them 3 to 4, I say 3 to 5 because not all of them germinate. Ideally, you would get 3 growing per rock wool, but sometimes I have 5 that all start. And what happens, even in soil gardens, you're always gonna have some that grow faster than others. And we allow those to get to the size we want. And then I will harvest just the ones that are large enough and I'll leave the others behind, just like the kohlrabi. So I can let those continue to grow. And that is just a hack. I had some more somewhere to get more food. If we can grow, this is arugula, heavily seeded arugula over here. If we can get, 3 radish per grow port versus 1, then definitely that's a goal because that's a lot more food. So over here, baby green bundles of lettuce. You'll see some onions poking out through here. This is a green onion. I'll put the name right here. It's kind of a cross between a leek and a green onion. I forget the name though. So I've got those going, and this is arugula, bundles of arugula, so delicious. When arugula flowers, this one's flowering. It's totally okay. It's one of the few things I say doesn't matter if it goes to seed, which flower, I still eat them that way. They're so incredible. They are just so incredible, regardless of if they flowered. Some things get real bitter and spicy, but arugula is already kind of spicy. So let's see, there was radish over here. These are my French breakfast radish. You can grow any kind you like. Black radish. Black radish are super nutritious and healthy, so I like to grow those. I just haven't had any seeds. I got some really cool seeds coming. So look for that video because I'll be sharing that. Okay, we're gonna flip this around and break down the rest of what you can grow indoors. And then I'm gonna do one more tower and then we're gonna take a break and talk about how to plant your tower out. And I said, I'm not gonna tell you where to plant things, but I will tell you a formula to get the most off your tower. All right, and some of these are droopy because they were off. I think this one's droopy. These two were the droopiest ones. They'll pop right back. Okay, so on this tower, towards the bottom, I have dill. Huge part of our diet. I like to designate grow ports to dill. Dill is a plant you can grow for a long period of time. It can be on your tower for like 4 months before you have to take it out. You just harvest off of it as you need it. It's excellent. This is buckwheat, and it's drooping after the little episode. You can see it has all these root feeders here, just how buckwheat grows. This is an experiment. Totally, and look, it's flowering, which means it's gonna make buckwheat. But this is an experiment. This is probably one, I wanna see if I can grow it as a crop with a whole tower, more of like a farming type setup for all of our buckwheat outside. That's what that's for. So I was just running an experiment. Looks like you can grow it indoors. Should you grow it indoors if you have one tower? Probably not. This isn't gonna provide you any food. And we wanna have, it's gonna provide you a little bit of food, but we want lots of food, and that's not gonna give you lots of food. So as we go up, the turnips are looking pretty rough. And so this is an example of just my climate being different than what you're gonna deal with growing indoors. They are starting to bolt. And turnips are a classic cool weather crop. Look at these gorgeous turnips. They grow amazing indoors. This is the Nagasaki Purple from rareseeds.com. They grow amazing indoors. And if your temperatures are controlled, you will just have so much success with those. I plant 3 to 5 seeds per rockwool, just like the radish. The goal being 3 is ideal for giving you nice size radish or turnips. Excuse me, am I calling them radish? They're turnips. And then you do the same thing. If you want to eat one, cut it, let the rest continue to grow. At some point when they're all big enough, then you take them out and start over. They're only gonna get this big, right? We're not gonna get those giant turnips that you may see in soil gardening. Same with beets. We're going for about this size is the max. So just know if you can wrap, I'm 5'4", if that tells you this size. If you can wrap your fingers around it and it still touches, it's probably too small unless you want to eat it. That's another thing we're going to discuss. But this is about the max. So if you're at here, go ahead and harvest it and use it up. Turnips, amazing for indoor gardening. Okay, I forgot to hit record and I have no idea what I just said. So the turnip thing, turnips grow amazing if you have your environment controlled. They are going to do amazing. Now, the bolting is not a bad thing. It just means your plant is stressed. So if you are growing indoors and this happens, for one, just harvest the food and eat it. That's what I'm going to do with these tonight. But you can cause it to happen by eating off your plants too much. And so what I mean by that is this right here, for example, is cilantro. Gorgeous bundle of cilantro. Let's say I wanted to take this to a friend's for a shared dinner. I could harvest the whole thing. I could cut the whole thing and it will grow back. But it's going to grow back and be really anxious to produce seeds typically, not always, but typically, and it will want to bolt. And bolt means just put off a flower and that changes the whole plant, right? That's why we want to eat these quickly when they start to do that, because it's going to start to change the flavor of our food. Cilantro is prone to bolting, so are turnips. Cold weather crops that get hot are going to want to bolt. Other things, if you just eat off of them too much, it can stress them and they will want to bolt. Lettuce doesn't do that. I can take all of this, I can cut it and I can let it regrow and it will regrow multiple times. I don't recommend doing it more than once, and I actually never even do it once. I just find the food tastes better, grows better, looks better, grows faster if I just start new seeds. I can get a lot of the growing done in the younger age of my greens in my grow station where they're safe and protected and being fed nutrients, versus if I cut it, let it sit in my tower and then wait for it to regrow. I think it's faster just to start over. I think you get better food quality. That's my personal opinion on that. Now, that doesn't mean I don't cut and come again. And that's a little bit different. I will come over to my basil, for example, and I'll take whatever I need to eat and leave the plant. I try to never take more than a third at a time to avoid stressing the plant before it bolts again. And how often can you take that third? I like to see regrowth before I take that much again. That doesn't mean I can't go take 5 leaves off of my basil, but if I want to take a full third of the plant for like a big meal, like if I'm making tabbouleh, for example, and I don't want to harvest the whole parsley, just a third of it. I don't want to come back a week later and take another third. I want to let that one regrow and then take a third off of another plant. So you can cut and come again all the time with lettuce. Just that thirds rule, just something to be mindful of so we don't stress our plants and cause them to get stunted where they just stop growing or bolt and go to seed. Usually if they stop growing, they are going to then bolt after that. If you notice that in a plant and you're like, why isn't this thing growing? If it's new and it's young, sometimes it's just adapting and the roots are getting adapted and it's just taking a minute and then it's going to take off. If it's an older plant and it stops, it's probably resting, putting all its energy into then bolting and going to flower. All right, so we talked about dill. Lots of turnips on here. So many turnips. And it's great. I'm going to eat all the little turnip balls just like I would if they were allowed to get bigger, but those need to come off because they're going to flower because of the heat. Another plant here, baby cauliflower. You can get this at Totally Tomato or just look for, what are they called? Not dwarf. I forget what they're called. I do it under baby tomato, but it has a name. It'll come to me. I'll put it here. But these grow to about indoors. I'm finding they're about bigger than a golf ball. 2 or so inches, 2 to 3 inches around. And the leaves are absolutely perfect and incredible. I love them. I would grow it just for the leaves. Like, you can make wraps out of these. They taste so good and they're just so gorgeous. Like, regular cauliflower leaves are gorgeous, but they're gigantic. And cauliflower could be growing for up to 90 days in a tower outside. These are ripe in 28 days. So some packages say 40. I have found it's about 5 weeks. And on the tower, 5 weeks on the tower and maybe 2 weeks in the baby grow station. So if you can get a lot of the growing done over in your nursery, like I recommend all the time, then you're gonna get really fast growth and all of a sudden you just have cauliflower. And instead of waiting for 90 days for a cauliflower that's not gonna be that great, that large, grown indoors, it's gonna be big, messy, you're gonna be waiting a long time. I just grow multiple of these and now I have dinner because I grew a bunch of them. So that's a trick. I'm testing right now to see how many you can grow per rock wool. I would say definitely do 2 per rock wool. I'm curious if 3 would work, or if that's gonna be too much. 2 is gonna be like the kohlrabi. You just get more food. We're not competing for nutrients here. The top plants tend to get a little bit like first dibs, but we're not competing for nutrients. So it's okay to push the boundaries a little bit. If you push it too far, it usually just gives you like greens instead of the food. But definitely try 2 per rock wool, and that's what I'm gonna do moving forward. All right, we talked about this. Cilantro grows amazing indoors. I plant, I think 3 to 5. I have in my ebook. Sometimes I forget what I do. It's usually like 3 to 6 to get a nice cilantro bundle. Sometimes I grow just 1 and let it get really full because it's a big plant still. This is an iceberg lettuce. This is another iceberg lettuce. They grow okay. Older lettuce is gonna start to get brown tips, and that's totally fine. It's just, it happens with older food. So here's another thing we need to discuss. Every food has a peak. I'm gonna show you one I screwed up on. So you're gonna have growing and you're gonna hit a peak and then they're gonna start to decline. And we want to eat our food at that peak, right? Or before. We don't want it to go on the decline. And when I go on Facebook, I'll go on Facebook groups and look at questions because I'm just curious, like for content purposes, what to talk about. And a lot of times I'll hear like, why is this leaf brown? Or why is this? It's not the lights. It's not your pH. Hardly ever, I don't even check. I have checked my pH once all winter. I think I did it with you guys on a video. That's it. I've never checked the pH on these. pH doesn't really matter as much as we think it does. I don't want to give bad advice there and tell you not to check your pH, but I never check my pH. So there's that. Now, and it's not the lights. Your lights are not too far. They're not too close. They can be too close to burn up leaves a little bit, but that's like with my tomato plant where the leaf is literally this far from the light and I didn't catch it for weeks. It's not a thing. It's not your problem. It's usually that food hit its peak and it's on the decline. And so we need to eat our food beforehand. And one of the things I like to teach when you're growing indoors is don't be afraid to eat your food young, because we have this situation where we're afraid to eat it because it takes a long time when you first start growing on a tower before you're interval planting. And if you just have one, it may feel like if I eat this lettuce, then I'm not going to have lettuce tomorrow. And that's probably true unless you're really on top of your planting schedule. So then we don't want to eat any, we just want to eat a little bit of it. And then all of a sudden the plant looks terrible, and it's because it got old and we never really got to experience it at its peak. It is better to start seeds more often, and I will give you guys the formula in a minute, and plant more frequently and eat your food younger than it is to just let it sit there and pick at it. You will get more food if you just come harvest that whole thing, eat a huge meal of it, and have a new, very mature, large baby come out of your nursery to take that spot. So let me flip this around and show you the one that I didn't do this with. Okay, this lettuce. It was so gorgeous that I didn't want to eat it because I was having so much fun looking at it, and I didn't eat it, and now it looks terrible. This is because it's old. This is not my pH. This is not my lights. This is not a pest. This is because this lettuce hit a peak, and instead of me going, oh, let's eat it, I continued to let it sit here, and now it's even wanting to flower. Look at that. That is a sign it's trying to produce the flower. So I screwed up. Don't do that. Eat your food. These are at their peak. And the signs, you'll know more as you grow, but the signs are you'll start to get little brown tips. Like we've hit our peak and we're gonna go downhill. So I need to harvest all of these, and we're gonna have a bunch of salad this week, which is awesome. I've got some bad leaves on there. That's another sign. When you feel like you're cleaning up bad leaves, it's time to eat your food. All right, I think that's it on this tower. All right, so when I make these videos, I like to kind of show the good parts of the garage, and you guys are getting all the background stuff too. But I want to get this information out. It's super important. So here is the formula. If you have a tower, let's say a home tower is 64, I'm gonna have to do math. Oh no. 64 grow ports if you add the baby greens extension. You want to take 1/4 of that number and start that many seeds every 2 weeks. 3 weeks at the max. You can play with this. If you don't eat a lot of food off your tower, you probably don't need the extension kit, and you can start seeds every 3 to 4 weeks. I recommend get the extension kit, learn to eat more food off your tower. That would be the goal, to eat way more greens and just get in the habit of that. So much nutrition, and greens at the grocery store are so depleted. So just like this food is medicine, and we can get so much benefit with so much less because it has all its nutrients intact. So that's just my rah-rah cheerleader moment to say eat more greens. But we're gonna take 1/4 that amount of 64. And okay, so out of that 1/4, which is 16, seeds you're going to be starting every 2 to 3 weeks. You want 3/4 of that amount, 3/4 of that 16. So what is that? 12. You want 12 of those to be fast turnover greens or fast turnover foods. The reason is that is going to keep you fed off your tower. If you take 12 of those and you heavily seed your greens, I will put a link in the description below to show you how I do that. I heavily seed my baby greens, so they are loaded with greens, and you'll see that when we walk around the towers. Or I'll start some regular lettuce with that. You know, lettuce still qualifies. And that'll be the difference. Like baby greens are going to be ready to eat faster than a head of lettuce, but I still consider lettuce like part of the fast growing greens. Your bok choys, arugula, mustards, anything you're going to seed as babies, those and that are going to grow pretty quick, those are the ones you want at least 12 of that. That keeps you eating food off your tower really quickly. It gives you something to harvest almost daily. If you do that really effectively, you can have baby greens to harvest all the time and have food to grab. Now, the other 4, we want to be thinking about things that take a little bit longer. Kale. Kale's going to grow on your tower, and it's going to be there for several months. So you can have kale for 6 months on a tower, and you can be eating off of it, and then eventually it's going to get where it stops growing a lot of leaves, or it looks past its peak, or it wants to bolt and go to seed, and you want to have a new one ready to take its place. So if you're going to have your kale for, let's say, 6 months on your tower, then take that number and divide it in half, and every 3 months be starting new kale seeds. That will help you always have kale on your tower. Collards you can keep on your tower longer. Dill is about 4 months. Some of these things, that's what my journal is for. And people have asked if how to grow is in this. No, this is just for you to write down things. Crop calendar, so that you know, okay, my kale, I'm pulling it out every 5 months. I need to be starting seeds every 2.5 months. And maybe for you, that doesn't get you that cycle where it lines up well enough, where you have kale full time and you want to start kale seeds every month, right? this is so you can track that information, because I can tell you what I do, but I'm growing in a totally different climate than you're going to be growing. I may be growing different varieties of seeds. Even if I'm growing kale, I could be growing a completely different type of kale. I'm growing like 7 different varieties of kale. They're all going to do different things. So that's what the journal is for, just so you can really track that information and kind of master this whole interval process. I bound this, by the way, at Staples, and they did a great job. I did front and back, so it's smaller and works wonderful. And I'll put a link to that below. So we've got our 12 that are going to be fast turnover greens. If you find that you eat more kale than baby greens, you can play with that number again. You know, you need to make this individual to your needs. You could be growing baby greens of kale, which take longer than lettuce, but still you would be starting those at the same time. So you're gonna have to figure out what you really want to grow to eat, and then the timing of those. Swiss chard can stay on your tower 6-7 months while you eat off of it. So we don't need to start that one as frequently. So that's how we do the 12 fast growing. 4, be thinking about what am I preparing for what's about to age out. Then on your tower, I say never do more than 1/4 of your tower, which would be 16, right? We decide 16. Grow ports on slow growing things. Now, with a home tower, because we have 64 grow ports, if you're doing an extension, I would base that number off not the extension. So remove the extension. I think it's 32, and then so I hope that makes sense. Like, don't calculate the baby greens extension number into what I'm about to say here. If you have a home tower, you want 8 spots max to be devoted to slow growing foods. If you have a flex, there's 28 spots. So you want 7, no more than 7 spots devoted to slow growing things. These are your peppers, your tomatoes, your celery. Kohlrabi can be pretty slow, not terribly slow, but it does take time. It's slower, anything like that. I'm trying to look around and see what else is slow. Parsley can be pretty slow to grow. Those things, you only want 1/4 of your tower, not including the extension, growing at a time, because that is going to be amazing food, but like it's going to take me a while to get to where I'm eating tomatoes, several months. It's going to take me several months before I'm eating peppers. And so if you do half your tower in those things, you end up feeling like you're growing food all the time and you don't have any food on the table. And that's sort of my formula. Now, does it have to be 8? Obviously not, but just be thinking of that. Like maybe 8. Okay, so let's grow 2 peppers. Let's grow 2 tomatoes. Let me put in 2 celery and 2 parsley. All of those, except for the celery, well, even the celery, I harvest off my celery all the time. All of those are going to be slow growing and just take time. Now, I want dill. So am I going to do a 9th spot? So I make sure I have dill. And I want rosemary. Yes. So I may reach that. I may push that number a little bit to like 10. Grow rosemary and kohlrabi. But just kind of be mindful of, you don't want too many slow growing things on your tower, unless your intention is like to grow all herbs that are going to be there all the time and you eat a ton of herbs, then go for it. But if you want to turn over and have food to eat fast, that is the formula. Hope that makes sense. All right, let's dive back into what you can grow, and I'll show you what else is growing. And one more note on that. If you're starting seeds, like I mentioned, every 2 weeks, and some of those are your slow growing things that need to be started, and you have 8 spots or 10 spots, you may end up where those numbers don't exactly line up if you have an extension kit on your tower. And you'll know, like as you start to start seeds, if you look around and you're like, my tomatoes are just now starting to bloom, do I need to start a new seed? The answer is yes. You need to have a new seed ready to take the place. And then eventually that seed's gonna need to go into your tower. And so you might end up where you have 10 plants that are slower growing on your tower because one tomato's aging out and the other one's in there rising up. So there is going to be some overlap. So it's not a perfect math, but the goal is to be just mindful so that you are growing fast turnover foods and eating off your tower. The other thing, don't be afraid to pull something out young in order to put your new baby greens in or your new something else in. If you start seeds consistently, it will force you to eat off your tower more because you will have to pull something out to put something in. And that is a trick I've learned that is really, really helpful for me. And it may be that I pull out my turnips and they're only this big and they could get this big, but I need to pull something out, and turnips sound good for dinner, and turnip greens are so healthy, and I want to make turnip pesto. That's a meal, you know, that's a very nutritious bundle of food I can pull off my tower and put on our table really quickly and grow something else. So just wanted to share that thought there as well. If you really want to get into having tomatoes and peppers and a lot of those things, 2 towers for indoors, and you're only growing indoors, then 2 towers might be the better option, where you can devote one to greens and herbs, and you can devote one to slower crops that are going to be there a while. And that gives you food to eat off of and food you're kind of waiting on, but that you can pick off of and eventually harvest consistently from if you're growing the right varieties of things. And one more thing, you can see how big these baby greens are. So this method works because I'm allowing my greens and things and my plants in general to stay on my grow station for a really long time. After they get their true leaves, their second set of leaves, I start feeding them nutrient water from the tower. If your tower isn't started yet, you can just take a gallon of water and add a tablespoon of A and a tablespoon of B to it. And you're gonna feed your babies, and they're gonna stay on the heat mat on your germinator under lights. The lights stay on full time. This is allowing them to get a lot of that really slow growth in the early stages done on the baby green section. And then when we put them in the tower, they're pretty mature and they're gonna grow faster. So that's what makes this interval process work. So sorry for the bad video here, but I wanted to insert that information before we moved on. Okay, so my towers have perked up already. Those beets were completely drooped over. This tower here, the green onions, again, is it worth growing if you have one tower? Probably not. Those are so easy to grow outside in a pot. I would grow them outside in a pot because they take up a lot of space and you don't get a lot of food off of them. But if you have the real estate and you want to grow them, that's great. This is a shishito pepper. This is cabbage or collards. This is a squash, zucchini. I can grow squash and zucchini because I have 7 towers. If you have 1 tower, probably wouldn't even fuss with that unless you really just want to challenge yourself and have that experience. Then it's worth it. You know, it's up to you how valuable that food is to your diet. You're going to get squash off of this, but you're not going to get like tons and tons with just 1 plant. So just be mindful of that. Beets, I think beets are worth it because they're so nutritious for us. I plant 3 to 5 seeds. 3 is ideal, and 5 can be pushing it, but you at least get the greens off the 4th and the 5th ones if they don't actually produce a bulb. But what I'm trying to do is show you the beet. There's a gigantic beet in here. I mean, really big. It's like this long and that wide. So that's one of them. There's 3. Actually, I think this one has 5 seeds. This is a medium size. Ow, this is stinging nettle. Medium size root. And then the other one's pretty small. So I can do a couple of things here. I can harvest the one big one and let the others continue to grow. Or what I typically do is plant them like this and I harvest the whole thing and I grow them to juice. So I don't really care that some of the roots are smaller. There's still a root there. It's still packed with nutrition, and so much of the nutrition is in the leaves too. So I do these big bundles and then I pop them out and juice them. So if you want roots and you want the root to be larger, then just harvest the one and it's great. Stinging nettle. Stinging nettle is a super food. I love it. I would grow it indoors, because I think it's so valuable, but it will sting you. So if you have small children, probably not the ideal plant. These are all turnips. These are not bolting and going to flower. The difference being they aren't large enough. They're small, so they weren't quite as stressed. The other ones, because they were larger, they're like, okay, we've done enough work. Let's produce flowers now that it's hot. I will tell you, turnips, the greens are super nutritious, but they're very delicate. So anytime you bump them, which is every day for me, it breaks the leaves off. So I just add those to my juice. Here's some kale. Obviously, I've eaten off of this a bunch. I just nibble on that all the time. Mustards. I think mustards are an amazing superfood. I'm gonna juice that leaf. I grow them all the time. This is a wasabi mustard. I love them in salads. You can grow them as baby greens. So I grow Mizuna or any mustards and multi-seed them so that I have mustards to eat. Delicate young ones in salads are best. These are gonna get spicy and hot as they get bigger. I love to make kale chips out of them. So good. Here's my bell peppers. Doing great. Bok choys. Bok choys do amazing. That's another mustard down there. This bok choy, I forget what this one's called. These have looked a little funny all year, but they've actually done really, really well, and I've eaten off of them a bunch. More dill, more lettuce. This one's droopy still. This one's at its peak. Start getting those long stems, it's gonna wanna go to flower. So need to harvest that. This is romaine. And romaine does great. Romaine is slow. So something to be mindful of when you choose varieties, when you're growing indoors, is how fast does it grow? I always looked at the age to maturity. So romaine can take 80 plus days, some of them, and baby romaine can take 40 days. So I typically grow baby romaine varieties when I'm growing romaine just because they grow faster. So I always look to days to maturity. You're not going to be able to get large eggplant, for example, inside. That's, first off, it can take 6 months to get eggplant outside, 5 to 6 months. It's a slow growing food, like a cabbage, that just needs all the right things. So we don't even want to attempt those. Grow the things that grow well and grow fast. Okay, cilantro, you're gonna see a lot of repeats. This is a pea, this is a Tom Thumb pea, and it is a tiny, tiny plant, and it makes these tiny little peas. Sometimes they're really big, actually. They're normal size. And I would say I plant 3 seeds per rockle, and I really enjoyed these at the beginning of the winter. Lately, I'm like, this is not giving me enough food. So are you gonna be able to harvest an abundance of peas off of these tiny little plants? No, so it might not be worth doing, but they are small enough you can actually grow them in the Baby Greens extension kit. And if you could get, 20 of them and you love peas, you could be snacking on peas every day. Just depends on your diet. Over here, you're gonna see the same thing, kales. I grow edible aloe for juicing. This is a patio baby eggplant. Eggplant's gonna be hit or miss. You're gonna get tiny little eggplants. It's up to you if that's worth it. This is a gourmet pepper plant. Makes these little pineapple-y peppers. Love it. Turnips, aloe. This is radicchino, and this is so incredible. I've been so pleased with this. It's slow to grow. Days to maturity, I think we're close to 80, but it's gorgeous. Purple foods are so nutritious. I will totally grow this again. And I saw one of these at the grocery store was $5.99 the other day. So to me, it's worth it. But again, I have the real estate, so think through that. You could grow this on the Baby Greens extension kit, I think. Yeah, the way it lays, it would just kind of be folded up in itself. But I think it would do fine if you want to attempt that. Check out these turnips. Incredible. That's the Nagasaki. More romaine. This is lavender. Not doing too great. I'm trying to get it through the winter so that it blooms when I put it outside in the spring. Rosemary. Rosemary does incredible. I juice it. I use it all the time. Here's our radish. We discussed that. Here's green beans. Green beans do great. You need a lot of them to, replace the grocery store with green beans when you're growing indoors. So it's just up to you if you want to give up the real estate, but they do well indoors. I think they're great to just snack on raw. Over here, I have more squash. There's celery, there's more green beans. This is an example of a purple cabbage that I seeded 2 or 3 of them just so I could have the purple leaves because I like them as a wrap. And I'm eating them for the leaves. I'm not expecting it to get ahead. It is producing one right now. Like they're going to still do it, but the goal is to eat the purple leaves, which I have. And they've been delicious. All right, this tower. I think a lot of this is the same. This tower, I will say, is a lot of my food is at a peak. Some of that due to the temperature. So just kale, lots of kale, parsley. This tower's pretty dirty. They can get pretty dirty towards the end of the season. Needs a good cleaning. I've got lots of beets on here, baby greens, lots of kohlrabi. This is a tower that hasn't been interval planted and turned over a lot because I have other towers. So everything's sort of aging at the same time. And this is actually one thing you want to avoid, because what happens in a situation like this is that all of a sudden everything reaches its peak and you need to take everything off and you have all this food you don't know what to do with, or you got to figure out how to eat. And now you're starting over from scratch. And you'll notice when you start your tower, it will feel like months go by unless you do my baby greens. It still feels like a really long time to get to that first harvesting place and that interval place. So I really encourage people not to ever get in a situation where they have to take everything out, clean their tower, and start over from scratch, because it just takes so long. Now, will it happen? Probably eventually, yes. But if you can avoid that it's better. A couple of hacks that I do is I have extra baby greens extension. I have extra grow ports. I have an extra baby greens extension kit and an extra standard grow port extension. And I will take those and take the tower, take the plants off, give it a good cleaning, put the fresh ones on, and then I put the other ones to soak and clean. And that helps just give me a way to clean my tower, because you can take your plants out and clean your tower. You can clean it with them in too. I've taken these outside and scrubbed them, but that is a way that if you need to, you can also take everything out and just go scrub it really well. I have the extras because I like to soak them sometimes in the citric acid, and it just makes it easier. But again, I'm doing this at a little bit larger scale for growing on one tower. You know, just be mindful, be thinking through, like, how do I not get in a situation where everything's ready at the same time and I'm starting over from scratch? And that is by doing the interval planting method. And I have been doing that here. Like, there's turnips that are young, baby greens. See, all of these, even the baby greens are pretty ready. My arugula is flowering, it's ready. A lot of this food is ready. But this is a mustard. I can eat off of that for a while. These kales you can eat off of for a long time. Purple cabbages, same thing. This is just stuff I've been coming and eating off of. Even your kohlrabi leaves you can eat off of. And trying to see if there's anything else. Yeah, this mostly just can't. Look at these. Just gorgeous. These are big. It's hard to tell on the camera. I need to be eating more kohlrabi. I have a lot of kohlrabi ready. All right, this is my pepper tower. If you want to grow just peppers, go for it. You can grow all your own peppers. Peppers are highly pesticide, like a real high pesticide load of the real bad pesticides at the grocery store. So for me, a whole tower devoted to peppers felt like a brilliant idea. So there's 20. And then I've got basil. And check this out. This basil is incredible. It's the size of my hand, the leaves. It's not a large leaf basil either. It's just super duper happy and has these incredible gigantic leaves. So these basil, these are my baby greens. These are my baby greens. This is what they look like when they're heavily seeded. And I think that's it. It's just baby greens. Yeah. Basil, peppers. when I was recording. I must not have hit play. In this next section, I'm going through my seeds and just reading off some things that you can grow, because obviously I'm not growing everything. So grab a pen, grab a notebook, and take some notes. I think I originally started with cauliflower. I might have missed a few things. I will try to add them in if I did, since somehow the recording got cut off. But we're just going to dive in and talk about other things you can grow. All right, my teens just came rolling in hot, so that's what you heard in the background. Turnips, broccoli, not worth growing. It takes forever. You'll end up with a small, mediocre broccoli head. You just get the leaves. Now, I love to grow it for the leaves to juice them, because they actually get really big and are great, but you aren't going to get a grocery. I don't want to say you aren't. There are people who grow broccoli indoors and don't mind waiting and getting that. It's just, do you have the real estate for it? I didn't even do it this year. I just didn't feel like it was worth it. So be mindful of that. Basil grows amazing. Kohlrabi. Ooh, let's talk about the variety. Not the purple, although it does grow. It just gets really large leaves. And I found this delicacy white does better. So the delicacy white is the best option for indoors. Herbs, you can grow dill, cilantro, basil, parsley, rosemary. I am growing lavender, although what's the point? Lavender is really just medicinal with the flower. I just haven't taken it out, honestly. I wanted it to go outside, and I think it'll stress it when I go from indoors to out, and then it'll bloom. Let's see. Fennel. Did we talk about fennel, cilantro, dill? There's lots of herbs you can grow. When it comes to herbs, just read up about the herb. Like coneflower or echinacea, for example, takes 2 years before it's going to flower, and it's a big perennial plant. You don't want to grow that in your house. So I like to stick to food herbs being cilantro, dill, things you're going to eat a ton of it, and then start over. And then rosemary. I can't grow rosemary in the soil, and it grows so amazing on the tower that I think it's worth it. So just research the herb and the characteristics of it, and is it really feasible to grow, and is it worth it? Peppermint, for example, will grow down in your channel and can be a really big mess. I just don't think it's worth growing. You can grow peppermint so easy in a pot. I just wouldn't give real estate to that, because how much peppermint do you use? Really, a couple of leaves, unless you eat a ton of peppermint. So endive is a green, and endive does really well. I heavily seed Mizuna, which is a mustard. This is that wasabi mustard you guys saw. I do a ton of mustards. I like to heavily seed them, eat them as baby greens. I also grow some for the actual large leaves. This is in the endive, but it was all Mizunas. Endive is a green that grows amazing. A little bit hardier, a little bit, I don't know what is across from, actually. Now I'm curious. What is endive? It's a bitter, crunchy. Oh, it's in the chicory family. Yeah, it's great. It grows leafy. I grow a lot of endive. I like it just because it's a heartier. It is more bitter, but I eat it like a lettuce. So cauliflower, you don't want to grow the standard. Unless you just want to wait, or you just want to grow it for the greens. I grow those baby cauliflower and have a lot of success with those. Spinach is tricky. Everybody loves the idea of spinach because we've been programmed to think that that is so nutritious. And there's other more nutritious things that grow in more abundance on a tower. You can grow longevity spinach, for example, which is more not really a traditional grocery store, but super nutrient dense and would grow like crazy on a tower. You can grow chijimusai is like a spinach, or tatsoi. A lot of those things I don't have on my towers right now. and they grow amazing, and they're more nutritious and they grow better. Spinach, if you want to grow spinach, I'm working on some content for that right now. It is hard to germinate, and spinach, one plant can give you like 5 to 7 leaves and is really small. We want to grow varieties that are known to be larger leaf and have larger size plants if you're growing spinach. So if you want to know more about spinach, be looking out for that video. Probably not worth growing on your tower until I master some of these other varieties and share that content. Kale, any kale you want to grow is fine. Cabbage, again, seed it 3 to 5. Grow it for the leaves, not the head. Tomatoes, stick with the hanging basket varieties, or the micro dwarf varieties, or the pot varieties from Totally Tomato. Parsley does great. Both versions. I grow all kinds of. I grow Italian parsley and curly leaf, and those do well. All right, unique greens. Asian greens will grow amazing. Arugula, endive. That's what endive looks like. Lots of endive. This is that buckwheat I mentioned. Probably don't want to grow that. Amaranth. This is an amazing Asian green. This is another amaranth. These are going to give you unique colors and greens in your diet. This one, Celtis. I'm growing this and it's growing well, and we're growing it for the stalk. So it produces this big, meaty, hearty stalk that I think is an excellent replacement for broccoli. So I'm growing that. This gets really big, giant, so don't grow that one. Endive and some other things. So you can get creative with the greens, unique greens. I love to like go on a hunt at night for unique greens to grow. Actually, I have an order coming in the mail with some really cool, unique stuff. Chervil and watercress. Chervil is in the parsley family, tastes like licorice, grows amazing indoors. I love it indoors. And then watercress grows amazing indoors and out, and is super nutritious. Zucchini and squash, they're gonna be finicky. And, you know, is it worth the real estate? Bell peppers, we discussed that. You can grow any pepper. I like to stick to 3 feet or under in size. So, and I ideally like to stick to 2 foot tall peppers if possible. So I just look for size when I'm looking for peppers. Peas, you don't want to grow vining peas. They're just going to take over and not give you a lot of food. It's doable. You just won't get a ton of food off of them. So you got to kind of decide if it's worth it. If you grew an entire tower of peas, you could get enough food, and that would be awesome. Eggplant, we discussed, like patio baby would be the only one I would try. Swiss chard grows amazing. Winter squash is pumpkins, acorn squash, butternut squash. All of those squashes are outdoor crops that grow in vines. Anything that's vining, you don't want to grow. If you grow cucumbers, they will grow indoors, especially if your environment is consistent. Grow container varieties, not the vining ones. The vining ones are just going to take over your house and make a giant mess and be frustrating. There are some varieties that you don't have to pollinate, and those I've heard some people have success with. If you grow squash or cucumbers, you're going to have to hand pollinate them. With tomatoes and peppers, you can just shake them or put a fan on them, or I've heard that you can use an electric toothbrush. So the male and female parts are inside of the flower, so it's just vibration that allows the pollination of those. The cucumbers, I get my dwarf varieties, or my patio varieties, I think is what they're called, from Park Seed Company. And basically one plant will give you like 20 smaller cucumbers, and then that plant's done. So that's something you need to be starting pretty consistently, and just know as it starts to produce cucumbers, it's gonna have some leaves that look ick and start to die off because all the energy is going into the food, and you're gonna need to hand pollinate those, and then they're gonna go away and you start over. So a little bit higher skill level for sure, but I say try it and get good at it. I mean, who didn't love a cucumber, right? Hot peppers grow amazing. Chili peppers, collards, fine. Just like mustards and kale, those are all sort of in the same family. They're gonna last about the same amount of time, which I would say like 4 to 6 months. Radish, we talked about celery, we talked about green beans. Again, is it worth the real estate? I think it is for mine. Is it worth the real estate? It's up to you. Onions, let's find that onion. Leeks, I love leeks. They are so slow, not worth it. It was this ishikura. So it's a green onion, but it's a larger green onion. So it's kind of a cross between a green onion and a leek. So I really liked those. So I'm trying them. I like the idea of those. I haven't actually tried them, but they're growing fine. So they're just gonna be slow. All right, thanks for joining me, guys. I hope this equips you to have an abundance of food in your indoor tower. If you don't have a tower yet, check the link below. Make sure to grab one of those. Growing our own food is super important, I believe, in this season of just trying to take back control of the nutrition going in our bodies, reducing our pesticide load, reducing our dependence on grocery stores, and just the broken system of how far food has to travel and all of that. This is a solution. It's a solution that helps you, helps the planet, helps other people, and totally worth it.